that wear the badge and go out every night. When we see those rallies, you don't understand how much that really means for all of us. So thank you again. So when we were talking about doing this rally and trying to pull it together, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about this bill that we're talking about, this reform bill. Everybody thinks that this only affects police officers in Boston, Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, and how they're going to do policing every day. But it doesn't. This bill affects every community, every police officer across the state. Whether you're from Weston or Westfield, Lowell, Lawrence, Lynn, down to the Cape, it really doesn't matter. If this bill passes as it stands today, it is going to have grave unintended consequences. And that's why we wanted to have it somewhere else besides the State House. We got to start bringing this out to the communities. We're not going to start getting the message out. If this bill passes, this is going to affect each and every one of you. So that's why we're here today. But with that being said, when we started talking amongst our friends and we were trying to find a location, making phone calls here or there, we ended up reaching out to Burlington, and they said, hey, if you want our common, it's yours. I can't tell you how gracious of a host they are. Yeah, please. And with that, with our first speaker, I want to bring up Bill Trelligan. Bill Trelligan is the Burlington Police Union President, and he's going to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Trelligan, and I work here at the Patrolman in Burlington. I'm the president of the Burlington Police Patrolmen's Association, and I'd like to thank Joe and his committee for putting this together and hosting this event. On behalf of my association, as well as the Burlington Police Command Officers Union, Police Chief Kent and Deputy Chief Brown, I would like to welcome you all here today. The Massachusetts House of Representatives and Massachusetts Senate has rushed differing bills through their respective chambers, both which, as currently written, will have major negative impacts in public safety in all communities across the Commonwealth. What happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to George Floyd is a tragedy, which has been condemned by law enforcement organizations across the country. The state legislature moved quickly but responsibly in Minnesota to enact meaningful police reform. I would like to just briefly touch on some of the differences in the Minnesota reform bills, as well as the legislation pending at the State House today, as other speakers will focus on specific areas of the Massachusetts bill in more detail. First, Massachusetts proposed legislation weakens qualified immunity for police officers and encourages frivolous lawsuits. Unlike Minnesota's legislation, which did not change the critical protections required to make split-second decisions on life or death situations. Second, Minnesota bill adds additional civilians to complement the majority of members who must have past or present experience of policing to the commission that certifies police officers. Contrary, Massachusetts' proposed bills grossly limit the amount of vital law enforcement knowledge and experience on the commission required to fully understand different situations that police officers are confronted with and the perspective they have in dealing with these situations. Third, Massachusetts bills immensely restrict the use of any force, not just what people generally consider to be excessive force, but any force whatsoever, contradictory to the standards set by the United States Supreme Judicial Court in the case of Graham v. Connor. The SJC standard has been mandated for decades and restricts the use of force by law enforcement officers in the United States to what is objectively reasonable based on the totality of the circumstances from the perspective of a reasonable police officer rather than 20/20 hindsight. The court goes on to say that because the test of reasonableness under the Fourth Amendment is not capable of precise definition or mechanical application, The proper application requires careful attention to the facts and circumstances of each particular case. The idea that use of force can be fixed by simply adding a few lines to Mass General Law is simply not true. It only creates more confusion and prevents officers from providing critical services to our community. Instead, efforts on continued training of appropriate use of force, along with the enforcement ability of a new police certification board, is a much more appropriate way to deal with an extremely small number of officers in Massachusetts who use force unreasonably. Not changing the long-time nationally recognized standard and application of reasonable force. Minnesota's bill makes clear that deadly force can be used only in line with the national standards set forth in Granby Connor. Fourth, the Minnesota bill prohibits police from using chokeholds unless lethal force is authorized. In Massachusetts, chokeholds are not trained in any police academy as a use of force. The Massachusetts bill prohibits chokeholds in any circumstance, even if in situations to save an officer's own life or the life of another. These are only a few of the important differences in legislation pending in the Massachusetts and the police reform bills in Minnesota, which have already been signed into law. The far-reaching 100-plus page bills in Massachusetts are not the only option to police reform. Another bill sits in the House Ways and Means Committee incorporating the values of the Black and Latino caucus set forth, as well as input from law enforcement. Police administrators and unions are not against responsible reform. In conclusion, I'd like to thank the 66 bipartisan members of the House of Representatives who saw the dangers in our profession and the risk of public safety of voting yes on Police Reform Bill H4860. This crucial vote allows for more meaningful discussion of the impacts to our community. I would strongly urge the conference committee and Governor Baker, if a report comes out from the committee, to carefully consider all sides, including the concerns of law enforcement, who have not had an equal seat at this table, as well as the consideration of all the negative impacts to all the residents of the Commonwealth. Thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy.